You know, from what we heard about Samantha, it sounds like she's borderline. Ah, I'm finally free! Samantha couldn't help but note that De Quincey sounded a great deal more chipper than she had on the coach earlier. De Quincey's smile was wide, her eyes sparkling. It seemed she had already recovered from Hannah's untimely death. Samantha sighed. Why had she assumed there was something gravely wrong with De Quincey anyway? Lillian was right. She really did have a morbid imagination, always assuming the worst like that. All right, De Quincey, don't go running off on your own. I am a teacher, not a shepherd, and I have no desire to hunt down any errant students who may stray from my flock. Yes, miss. And the same goes for the rest of you. Miss Pope turned to face a congregation of St. Mary's students, her hands on her hips. If any of you get lost, I'm not going to trouble myself over it. You're not in primary school anymore. You are old enough now to take some responsibility for your actions. Yes, miss. A dull chorus of voices answered back, fronted by De Quincey. Why did she sound so cheerful? Was it because she had an excuse to hang around Lillian for 2 whole days? And maybe even, gasp, shock, scandal, see her in her pyjamas? Saucy. De Quincey had always loved Lillian. She was borderline obsessed, and the border was growing thinner and thinner with every passing day. Though Samantha knew Lillian did not particularly care for De Quincey, Lillian did not particularly care for anybody, save for her younger brother. It still stung. She couldn't help but feel jealous. Why was De Quincey allowed to link arms with Lillian anyway? At least the unimpressed look on Lillian's face was so evident, even Samantha, standing several feet away, was able to spot it. Though Samantha couldn't hear what Lillian was saying, she saw the blonde girl shake De Quincey away as one would remove a spider from the sleeve of their cardigan. Lillian's efforts, however, were in vain. As soon as she managed to free herself from De Quincey, the girl started clinging to her arm again, like a second skin. Why are you being so cold, Lily? I thought we were friends. Mr. Quincey! De Quincey jumped. Yes? What is it, miss? Far be it from me to criticise your youthful zeal, but I fear you may be distracting some of your classmates. Could you please keep your hands to yourself? De Quincey's cheeks turned light pink. She smiled bashfully and dug the tip of her shoe into the ground, tracing semicircles into the dirt. Yes, miss. As Miss Pope lectured De Quincey on her poor conduct, Lillian took this as an opportunity to disentangle her arm from De Quincey's and walk away. And while we're on the subject, something else is bothering me. Why do you never button up your shirt? Well, I suppose it's because I'm opposed to the fascist system that's keeping all us students squashed underfoot. I want to show everyone I'm not just another cog in the machine, you know. Why, I applaud your efforts. School is not, as many teachers would tell you, a place where young people go to nurture their unique talents. It is a place where young people are sent, against their will, so they can learn how to follow orders and do as they are told. Anybody who informs you otherwise is a liar. Wow. Forgive me if I'm being rude, but you sound a little bitter, miss. If I sound bitter, it's because I am. Like you, De Quincey, I thought when I was young and foolish that I was an individual and should therefore be allowed to express myself as such. I even dabbled in poetry. Can you imagine it? Poetry! Well, you are an English teacher. Indeed. And do you know what kinds of people become English teachers? De Quincey pondered, an awkward smile on her face. The kinds of people who aspire to become published authors or poets, but fail to achieve their goals? Exactly! When I entered the working world, I became far more cynical. You come to school to do your exams, get good results, and boost our school's reputation. And teachers who care about the students beyond what is written on a few slips of paper are few and far between. Well, if you only care about my results, how I dress shouldn't matter, should it? Nice try, De Quincey, but that isn't going to cut it with me. You might be smart, but that doesn't amount to much if you only show up for half your lessons. Gosh damn it. Perhaps I could overlook your flagrant misconduct if you applied yourself more seriously, but as it is, I have to ask you to button up your shirt. Yes, miss. And can you do something about your hair in the future? The colour is hardly school regulation. But it took me 3 hours to dye it this colour. And it would take less than 3 minutes to chop it all off with a pair of scissors. Is that what you would like? I could always buy a wig. Would that be acceptable? You may do whatever you like, as long as you can stop it from being so blue. Yes, miss. Finished with the rebellious De Quincey, Miss Pope turned her eagle eye towards Samantha. Samantha was straggling along the rear of the group, her face pale, one hand on her stomach. From a distance she almost looked like a wounded war hero, limping away from the carnage of the battlefield to find an undisturbed place to die. On closer inspection, however, she looked like what she truly was, a foolish girl who had ingested far too much caffeine far too quickly, and now was suffering the consequences. Miss Pope, being Miss Pope, had no sympathy. Samantha had been making these tortured noises for the past 10 minutes or so. Each small utterance that escaped her lips was coupled with a gurgle from her stomach. She wasn't going to be sick, was she? She really, sincerely hoped she wasn't. Not on her geography field trip, in front of her class. That would be so humiliating. Roberta looked at her, half sympathetic, half smug. It seemed she had gotten over her momentary irritation on the coach, perhaps because Samantha now looked so dreadful. Are you alright? I feel like I'm gonna be sick. Well, I did warn you. But by that point it was already far too late. You look even sicker now than when you drank all that absinthe. Oh. Ew. If anyone's never had absinthe, the way I could describe it is it's licorice from hell. It's gross. Don't even talk to me about absinthe. I've learnt my lesson. I really thought I was going to die back then. I even started to write out my will. Of course, that only made me feel even more terrible when I realised how few friends I have to distribute my unimpressive amount of personal belongings with. How nice. It was the exact opposite of nice. I felt awful. Then why did you drink it? Because I'm young. I wanted to try new experiences, broaden my horizons, strengthen my mind. But all you strengthened was your gag reflex. Samantha wrapped her arms around her stomach, even tighter, and hiccuped. It was a hiccup that brought with it the strong taste of bile, sharply acidic, and she had to swallow it back down, with tears in her eyes. Even though she had finally made it back to her beloved countryside, she could not bring herself to enjoy her surroundings. Partially that was because of her stomach, but it could have also been because of the miserable weather. It was an overcast March day, and the sky was dark and cloudy, promising rain. The wind was cold, stinging Samantha's cheeks so they turned red. The ground was at a steep incline, and walking up it was tiring. The constant thud, thud, thud of Samantha's feet as her shoes met the uneven earth made her stomach gurgle even more. She just had to keep going. 1 foot in front of the other, 1 foot in front of the other, 1 foot. Hey! Samantha blinked, tugging anxiously at the hem of her skirt. The person standing before her was the very last person she had expected to see. It was Lillian. Roberta frowned, looking at Lillian in much the same way a disaffected medical student, bored from endless dissections, might regard a corpse. Yes? What do you want? I want the pair of you to pick up the pace. You're slowing the rest of us down, and Miss Pope is growing impatient. That may be the case, but what authority do you have to berate us, Lillian? I have every authority. I am head of the student council, as you should be aware, given you are the treasurer. We have attended enough meetings together I thought you would remember, or else, is my face so very nondescript you forgot? No, that isn't it. The passive aggression between the two girls was almost tangible. You could have cut it with a knife. Samantha gulped. This time it wasn't because she felt sick. Although Roberta and Lillian had a great deal in common, Samantha thought so at any rate, but she knew full well both girls would have disagreed with her. The pair never really got along. Their enmity was not immediately obvious to the untrained eye, given they were always rigidly polite when they spoke to each other. But their voices were cold, stretched taut over several years' worth of tension. "I'm surprised you were speaking to us at all, Miss Student Council President. I thought you would have better things to do." "I do. How charming." "I could say the same to you." "You could at least thank me for my concern." "Thank you for your concern, Lillian." "I suppose that's fine." Lillian looked Samantha over for a few moments, her expression inscrutable, eyes piercing. "Hey!" Samantha jumped, as though she had been poked with a pin. She had not expected Lillian to address her, even though she had not used her name. Given Lillian had been ignoring her pointedly for almost 3 months, it seemed rather strange that she would choose to engage in conversation right now. Despite that, Samantha attempted to keep her cool. She blinked, eyes fluttering, and tried to meet Lillian's gaze. Tried, and failed. Samantha clenched her hands into fists at her sides, trying to stop them from shaking, and spoke. "Yes? What is it?" "You look rather unwell. Is there some kind of problem?" I'm fine." "Are you sure?" "Well, Samantha bit her lower lip. Her hands balled into fists by her sides, started to tremble. What should she say? Let's see. "I thought you were ignoring me. I really did miss you." "It's nothing, don't worry." "Let's call her out." I'm just a little bit surprised." Lillian's eyebrows raised into 2 neat little arches. "What do you mean? Why should you be surprised?" I thought you were supposed to be ignoring me." "Don't be so melodramatic. I wasn't ignoring you. I'm not a child."
"Then what were you doing?"
"I was just avoiding you, that's all."
"Oh.
So that was all, was it?" Even though Samantha had a great deal of respect for Lillian, the audacity of that statement was enough to help her overcome the fluttering of nervous butterflies nestling in the pit of her stomach. "You can call it whatever you want, Lillian. Either avoiding or ignoring, but it all amounts to the same thing. No matter what you say, you have not spoken to me for almost 3 months, and that is a fact." "That's right. You may be trying to act reasonable, Lillian, but you cannot deny that you have not been a good friend to Sam. You know how she gets over the holidays. You should have expected it. You're supposed to be her friend."
Unlike Samantha, who was shaking, Roberta who was scowling, Lillian's expression did not change. Instead, she brushed a few strands of hair from her face, calm and collected as per usual.
"I apologized if I caused any offense. It was not my intention." "Your intentions don't matter. The end result is what's important." "And yet, despite your high-handed lecturing, I seem to recall you were the one who went home to stay with your family over Christmas, whilst I remained at St. Mary's with Samantha. How peculiar."
Roberta's face turned red. It often did when she started to lose arguments.
"Why, you... That doesn't have anything to do with anything." "No, it does not. Neither do you. This conversation is one Samantha and I should have alone. You have no part to play in it." "Of all the rude things! I have been friends with Samantha far longer than you have. And Samantha is old enough to stand to her own in the discussion without your help." "Why, you...
"Roberta, it's all right." Samantha offered Roberta what she hoped was a comforting smile. It was about as comforting as she could manage, given her stomach still felt like it was being eaten away from the inside. "Lillian is probably right. This is a conversation we should have alone."
"Indeed. I'm glad at least you understand, Sam. Now, however, is probably not the best time for it."
"What do you mean?"
"I mean, we are falling further and further behind the rest of the class. We should hurry."
"Ah, yes, of course." Samantha jumped, her eyes wide as goose eggs. At least At least Lillian's, whose expression had been dour throughout this exchange, seemed to find it amusing, because Samantha swore she saw the smallest hint of a smile tugging at the corners of her lips. Just for a second. Maybe less than that. But it was still enough. Roberta, meanwhile, could be heard muttering under her breath, "Fucking bitch." Lillian, being Lillian, ignored her completely,